World News Tonight this Saturday, more pipe bombs turn up in rural mailboxes in the Midwest as the FBI begins its investigation. Fury from the faithful after Boston's Archdiocese balks on a deal to compensate abuse victims. Why some Americans are losing the family home to Medicaid. A big step for the big night. Students in a small Georgia town integrate their prom. And spinning spider webs into gold. Superheroes on the silver screen.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight, Saturday.
Good evening. I'm Dean Reynolds. Today in Nebraska, as many as 5 more pipe bombs were found, just one day after 8 others were discovered in Iowa and Illinois. 6 people were hurt after some of the bombs, left in mailboxes, exploded. Anti-government notes accompanied some of the devices. The U.S. Postal Service has suspended mail delivery in parts of all 3 states. ABC's Justice Department correspondent Pierre Thomas is standing by in Washington with more. Pierre?
Dean, tonight the government is telling postal workers across the country to be cautious.
Concerned about the potential for another wave of bombs, the U.S. Postal Service is checking as many as 100,000 mailboxes in the Midwest. The search comes after someone placed more than a dozen pipe bombs in mailboxes in small towns in Illinois, Iowa, and Nebraska.
We are putting together a task force of postal inspectors with the assistance of local law enforcement as I speak to go out into the rural areas that have been affected by this.
Sources tell ABC News they suspect one person or group is responsible for placing the bombs. The pipe bombs were made of nearly inch-thick steel and rigged to detonate as the mailboxes were opened.
I don't even think nobody's checking their mail here, to be honest with you. It's pretty scary.
According to one law enforcement official, one bomb blew shrapnel as far as 100 feet away from the point of detonation and was potentially strong enough to kill. Killing people appears to have been the intent of the bomber, who in most cases attached a typewritten letter to his devices. There is no such thing as death, the letter states. The people I've dismissed from this reality are not at all dead. And the bomber, who claims the government is manipulating its citizens, promises more attacks. More attention-getters are on the way, the writer says, noting that killing a single famous person would get the same media attention as killing numerous unfamous humans.
He does have our attention. We want to listen now.
Tonight there are a few leads, and the government wants to open dialogue with the bomber to try to convince him that killing people is not the way to get attention. Dean?
Thanks. ABC's Pierre Thomas reporting from Washington. In West Virginia tonight, state police and the National Guard continue the door-to-door search for victims of severe Appalachian floods. 6 people are dead, including a 14-month-old girl. 11 others are missing. Hundreds of people have been left homeless. In Boston tonight, angry Roman Catholics are exploring new legal options against the Archdiocese. At issue, yesterday's surprise about-face in a multi-million-dollar settlement with alleged victims of a sexually abusive priest. ABC's Ron Claiborne has this report from Boston.
Under the proposed settlement, an arbitrator would have soon begun distributing up to $500,000 each to Patrick McSorley and 85 other alleged victims of former priest John Geoghegan. Now they get nothing.
It is so shocking. A done deal. They reneged on a done deal.
The Archdiocese scuttled the accord, citing its cost and that of future cases. A lawyer for the victims said he was assured as recently as Thursday the deal was all set.
I asked them time and again, do you have the money? Because I don't want to put my clients through this. And they said, don't worry, we have the money.
Church officials say since the tentative settlement was reached 2 months ago, many more victims have come forward.
The scope of the issue is expanding. Our resources are not.
Cardinal Bernard Law approved the settlement, but the church's finance committee overruled him. But Law, who had called the accord important closure for Geoghegan's victims, is likely to bear the criticism.
It's another case where something which may be logical in terms of, the financial realities, just the public image implications are so disastrous that you'd think that they would have avoided it.
The abrupt decision to kill the settlement could hurt the church financially. Angry parishioners have already withheld millions of dollars in donations. Tomorrow, many Boston area priests were planning on pleading with parishioners not to withhold donations any longer, saying they are needed to help pay for important social programs. That may be a harder sell now. Ron Claiborne, ABC News, Newton, Massachusetts.
Turning to news overseas, in Nigeria today, a domestic airliner carrying about 75 people crashed in a northern city. The plane plowed through 3 buildings just after taking off from a nearby airport. Rescuers pulled at least 2 survivors from the wreckage. The cause of the crash is unknown. Tomorrow in France, incumbent President Jacques Chirac faces his far-right rival, Jean-Marie Le Pen, in the nation's presidential runoff election. It has been one of the most divisive political races in modern French history, and the divisions will likely remain, as ABC's Richard Gisbert reports from Paris.
Almost no one expects Jean-Marie Le Pen to win tomorrow's election, not even Le Pen. He has said he would be happy with 25% of the vote. He's up against a broad coalition. More than 1 million people marched this past week to reject what Le Pen stands for. He blames France's problems on its immigrants and once called the Holocaust a detail of history. The protests were peaceful, unlike those immediately after the first round vote, when Le Pen's second-place finish angered France. I'm shocked, Le Pen said. They're protesting against the thermometer, not the disease. What has alarmed political moderates, both here in France and across Europe, is that just by getting this close to the French presidency, Jean-Marie Le Pen has given a significant boost to other European political parties like his. Extreme right-wing parties who blame immigrants for unemployment and Europe's growing crime problem. Parties that tend to attract neo-Nazi support. In Austria, the Freedom Party, once led by Jörg Haider, won 27% of the vote in 1999. In Holland, a far-right anti-immigrant party is at 20% just 10 days before an election there. Denmark, Switzerland, and Belgium all have far-right parties that have grown at the expense of the political center. European voters seem to be sending their mainstream politicians a message.
If you don't solve this problem of security, immigration in particular, next time you will be out of power and we will trust for good one leader like Monsieur Le Pen.
President Jacques Chirac will almost certainly be re-elected tomorrow, but he knows most of his support won't come from people voting for him. It will come from people voting against Jean-Marie Le Pen. Richard Gisbert, ABC News, Paris.
Still ahead on World News Tonight this Saturday, why new graduates in this economy face a hard time making the grade, losing the family homestead to Medicaid, what one state is doing about it, and the disinvited guest to one prom down south, segregation.
This is World News Tonight Saturday, brought to you by Viagra.
Firefighters in Boston tonight are battling a serious blaze at the Charlestown Navy Yard. It started at the old Rope Walk building this afternoon. The Navy Yard is home to the USS Constitution, the oldest commissioned warship in the world. The ship is not in danger from the fire at this time. In North Carolina, 8 inmates are dead and 13 others injured in a fire at a county jail in the western part of the state. Investigators say it appears the fire began accidentally in a storage area. Inmates were trapped in their cells in dense smoke. The Labor Department said yesterday the nation's unemployment rate surged last month to 6%, its highest level in 8 years. For recent and soon-to-be college graduates, that statistic underscores what they are quickly learning. It's one of the grimmest job markets in years. ABC's Barbara Pinto has more.
With graduation just weeks away, Diana Doty, a senior at the University of Chicago, is spending as much time searching for a job.
What are you looking for, Diana?
As she is studying for finals.
The job market doesn't seem to be that open to at least entry-level positions, so it's definitely a concern.
Michael Eagle at American University in Washington is having similar problems.
I thought
having a diploma was your free ride to a job, but it's definitely not like that right now.
This job market is the worst we have seen in the past decade.
Karen Allen's job is helping seniors find jobs.
We have experienced about a 40% decrease in employer participation and hiring.
Not only have the multiple job offers of recent years disappeared, the whopping salaries are also gone. The class of 2002, more than 1 million strong, is inheriting a job market battered by recession.
This year's graduates are facing stiff competition from an unexpected source. More than 2 million laid-off workers, many who are more than willing to accept entry-level jobs.
These grads are competing against laid-off dot-commerce technology workers, grads over the last few years who want to get back to the more traditional entry-level job that starts a career.
Or have like sales experience.
The jobs providing the most opportunity are in fields that last year's graduates might have considered unglamorous: healthcare, accounting, sales, and government work. But some seniors aren't ready to settle yet.
It's starting to make me at least feel very nervous about my prospects for the future, not having a job.
Many students will be spending the final days of their college careers majoring in job hunting and minoring in frustration. Barbara Pinto, ABC News, Chicago.
Now to a healthcare battle you may not know about. At its center, a federal law requiring states to recover the costs of nursing home care for Medicaid recipients. How the money is recovered may surprise you. ABC's Barry Serafin reports on one state's fight against the law.
These are difficult times for 86-year-old Phil Frazier of St. Albans, West Virginia. His savings are draining away to pay for nursing home care for his wife, Ginny, who has Alzheimer's disease. When he can no longer pay, Medicaid will. But Frazier worries that after his death, the government will take his home to get its money back.
The state can recover the home and sell it if something happens to me. I will not be able to pass it along to my 2 sons.
In 1993, Congress passed what is called the Estate Recovery Act, requiring states to collect Medicaid costs, mostly federal dollars, paid for nursing home care. That often means seizing patients' houses after they die. When Elba Mims of West Virginia died, it didn't take long for the government to come after her home.
And 7 days later, I received a letter from Medicaid Recovery stating they would put a lien against her home and that they would take it for the initial price of $43,900.
West Virginia, a state with many low-income jobs and a large elderly population, is challenging the law in court.
This program results in the federal government requiring, as a condition of health maintenance for elderly people, that the state government pick the bones of the poor and send them what's left.
Nationwide, Medicaid pays nursing home costs for more than 1 million senior citizens. The money recovered pays for less than 1% of the program.
Why put the agony upon the working poor of this country for such a very small return?
We wanted to ask officials here at the Department of Health and Human Services about the program to collect money. They declined to be interviewed. People like Phil Frazier say it's hard enough to deal with a loved one's illness.
But then to have this happen with what little that you have left, it seems over and beyond what's fair.
Frazier and many other elderly Americans hope the courts or Congress will decide that homes can no longer be taken in return for health care. Barry Serafin, ABC News, Washington.
A satellite called Aqua was launched early today in California. The $952 million mission is expected to improve weather forecasts and follow changes in the global climate. A rare birth is being celebrated at SeaWorld in San Diego. Takara, the killer whale, gave birth to this calf last night, only the second whale conceived by artificial insemination. The newborn, who has not been named yet, brings the park's killer whale population to 10. Still ahead, students in the South who are changing history at the prom. This is a story about change delayed. The place is Taylor County, Georgia, where in 1946, an African American who dared to vote was lynched. Many things have changed in Taylor County since then, but not everything. Last night, one high school in this corner of the South took another step forward. Here's ABC's Steve Osunsami.
It took 30 years for Taylor County, Georgia to reach this moment.
We go to school together and sit in the classroom together. Why not have fun together?
Times have changed, not in the past, and this is not the 70s, it's 2002.
Until now, there were 2 racially segregated proms. And in this rural community of about 9,000 people, that was just fine.
Yeah, that's just his tradition. That's how it's always been and forever. Like, they went to the white prom and their parents, their grandparents, everybody. It's just, that's how it's always been.
This is a community where change hasn't come quickly. It took 26 years after court-ordered desegregation to integrate the schools. The school district stopped sponsoring the dance, some say to prevent interracial dating. So the students sponsored their own racially separate dances.
Nobody wanted to challenge it, and then Jericka decided. She just took it upon herself. And it happened.
The power of one student.
One student.
Can someone get my phone, please?
17-year-old Jericka McCrary convinced her class, her teachers, and her town that the time for a single prom had come.
When I saw that perfect slogan in one of my teachers' classrooms, stand for what is right even when you're standing alone.
Steve Smith is a parent and a teacher who says despite appearances, the town's racial legacy is in its past.
They all just mingle together, and they go to homecoming dances together, football, basketball, they cheer together, and it's just a close-knit group of kids.
This isn't the only high school in Georgia that has had 2 separate proms. At least 2 others are still doing things the old way. Next year, another difference here. These same students will take their senior trip together. The first time that's ever happened.
Even so, white and black students still arrive separately, and there will be 2 students named most likely to succeed, one white, one black.
All the senior superlatives are still a white and a black and, separate ones.
But last night, when the king and queen were finally crowned, a sign things here are certainly changing. Steve Osunsami, ABC News, Butler, Georgia.
At Churchill Downs, the 128th annual Kentucky Derby war emblem won tonight's Run for the Roses, beating out Proud Citizen. Security was intense at the famed event this year, with some 1,400 law enforcement personnel on hand. Still ahead, what's black and white and web all over, and cleaning up at the box office. Finally tonight, Spider-Man, the action hero, is springing to the silver screen this weekend on a web of hype. It appears the movies are giving comic book characters new powers, all the way to the bank, as ABC's Brian Rooney reports.
He may be on top of the world this weekend, but just 6 years ago, Spider-Man and all his buddies at Marvel Comics, the Hulk, Fantastic Four, and the X-Men, were bankrupt and looking like losers. A whack! It became a colossal fight between bankers and businessmen over the value of Marvel's character. According to a new book, the winners had supervision.
I know at one point of the bankruptcy, one of the current heads of the company said to a group of bankers, Spider-Man alone is worth $1 billion. And he didn't mean from one movie.
Suddenly, Hollywood came casting, and ka-wham! The superheroes were back. It started with Blade, a movie about one of Marvel's lesser-known characters, but it was a hit, and X-Men followed.
When you hear the words comic book, for some reason it gets a little less respect than it deserves, because it's really great literature. These are great stories, great characters.
It's literature for teenage boys who fantasize about saving the world and getting the buxom girl, something they could never do in real life. As the primary artist for the Spider-Man comics, John Romita Jr. draws 2 books a month.
Spider-Man is this much fantasy, but it's this much reality, and that fantasy is where you go as long as the reality is close.
But until recently, what his imagination could put on paper could never be duplicated on screen.
Come on, move, kid!
The Spider-Man movie is a combination of live action and computer-generated images. It is made to look like frames from a comic.
And this is a funny thing to say. The movies are getting as good as the comics, and they're even getting better. The movie versions are getting better than the comic book version. I never thought I'd say that.
And now Marvel can make more money on movies than it ever did with comics. Movies are in the works for Daredevil, The Incredible Hulk, and The Invincible Iron Man. Marvel has a library of 4,700 characters. Cheese! And unlimited possibilities for sequels. Brian Rooney, ABC News, Hollywood.
And that's our report. Tomorrow on World News Tonight Sunday, a small Texas town's mission to remake its image through mariachi music. I'm Dean Reynolds. For all of us here at ABC News, have a good weekend. Good night.